For nearly 3 decades, the Berlin Wall stood as the most dangerous border on earth, a concrete line dividing Berlin between 2 different ideologies. And then one night in 1989, the wall fell. To understand how, we need to discuss a man best known for talking to a car. This basement corridor that we have gone out of our way to travel to is Berlin's David Hassellhoff Museum. There's not a lot in here, and museum might be overstating it, but it shows you the man's influence on this city. He's been here, he signed it.
Making Waves, the autobiography. We've got the CD of Looking for Freedom. Hoff Loves You. Did David Hassellhoff end the Cold War? Yes.
There is more to this urban legend that David Hassellhoff ended the Cold War than you might think. So here we have in a globe here, a bit of the Berlin Wall, right? I pointed it out to Sonia and she goes, oh wow. I mean...
It's in like a crystal ball. It's in a crystal ball.
20 minutes ago, we were at the actual Berlin Wall with our hands all over it. And yet she sees this and goes, oh wow. We're literally in like a boiler corridor. There's...
Yeah, look at this. There's like a warning.
It's all pipes above us.
Technique.
You know we're not alone down here anymore, don't you?
Oh shit.
I very much grew up a Cold War kid in the 80s. Something that was always in the news and always being discussed was the situation here in Berlin. And then I got into music, which is relevant for this video. My favourite album of all time, Marillion's Misplaced Childhood, was recorded right here in Berlin. My parents knew I was fascinated with it. In 1990, they went on holiday, so the year after the wall fell. They went on holiday to Berlin. I'm guessing that was my dad's idea, and brought me back a bag of wool. Might not have been real wool, but they knew it was something that I really focused on. So the purpose of this video really is to sort of understand that role of music within the Cold War, because that was very much sort of what unlocked it for me. Come with us, because we're gonna see what there is to see. Look out for the magic colour changing shirt. David Hassellhoff didn't win the Cold War, but he was there at the end. Because by the time the Berlin Wall fell, Western music and culture had already been shaping life on the other side for decades. To understand how, we need to go back to the day the wall went up. So these are the 3 guys that were most responsible for German reunification after the wall fell. And I hope these are secure on those pedestals, because if not, heads will roll. It's a good joke, isn't it? On the 13th of August 1961, on a day that came to be known as Barbed Wire Sunday, overnight the East Germans had erected a wall. It wasn't this one came later. People were separated from families overnight. East Berliners who worked in the West no longer had jobs, and for the next couple of years there was no movement between East and West Berliners. What people think of as the Berlin Wall was actually 2 walls. This here, and then another one, an inner and an outer wall, separated in the middle by something called the Death Strip. And it was known as that because crossing it would probably get you killed.
In the earliest days of the wall, the border often ran directly along streets, and in some places even through the middle of apartment blocks. Residents living on the East German side suddenly found that their front doors opened into the west. At first, people simply jumped from windows or climbed out of buildings to escape. But the authorities swiftly put a stop to this. Apartments facing the border were cleared. Windows were bricked up and entire buildings were emptied of residents. Some were eventually demolished altogether to create the open security zone of the Death Strip. By the time the Berlin Wall reached its final form in the 1970s, it was far more than just a wall. The iconic concrete wall covered in graffiti on the western side was actually just the outer barrier. Behind it, on the East German side, was a controlled military zone. First came patrol roads, where border guards would intercept anyone trying to flee. Then anti-vehicle trenches, designed to stop cars from smashing through. Watchtowers stood at regular intervals, giving guards a clear view across the border, and floodlights illuminated the area at night. In between all of this lay the death strip, a wide open expanse of raked sand or gravel. Anyone who ran across it would leave footprints immediately visible to the guards in the towers. In many sections there were also alarms, tripwires, guard dogs, and for a time even automatic firing devices. And the guards themselves operated under strict shoot-to-kill orders if anyone tried to leg it.
Over the years, at least 140 people were killed attempting to cross the Berlin border alone, though the true number may be much higher.
We've climbed the tower to take a look at a preserved section of Death Strip that's been left exactly as it was, minus the guards, guns and dogs.
Officially, the wall wasn't built to stop people leaving, but to keep enemies out. The leadership of the GDR insisted the barrier was an anti-fascist protection rampart, but few people truly believe this explanation, not least because the guns, the mines and the watchtowers all pointed inward towards the east.
We've just had coffee in this cafe, not realising that the wall would have run right through it.
So, wall here, these posts.
Yeah, look.
Posts,
look at these rusted
and
long things.
And the wall runs up there and into the cafe.
And yet, no matter how tightly it was controlled, the wall was never truly airtight. Ideas and culture still found a way through.
This is Potsdamer Platz. You might have heard of it. It was quite famous during the Cold War. When the city was divided up, the border between the Western Allies and the Soviets ran straight through here. Potsdamer Platz was Death Strip. But it's also where the propaganda war started. American troops started putting up signs, big boards that they'd paint with messages for people in the East. Then the Soviets started doing the same thing. And
wait, what did the sign say?
Stuff like going on about a free press, about how much better things were over there than they had it over here.
And what would the Soviet sign say?
I don't know. But we have potatoes. These bricks basically trace the route of the wall around the entire city, so you can walk the whole thing. This is a good example of a street that was bisected by the wall. Here you had apartments, and less than 12 feet away was the Berlin Wall and Death Strip beyond that. And I know this because we're literally walking on the spot when Marillion filmed the video for their single K-League. Really, it's just pure self-indulgence.
The East German state tried to make Berlin hermetically sealed in its effort to control not just movement, but outside influence. However, the tighter it squeezed, the more people began to want what lay on the other side of the wall.
So this is Nordbahnhof, one of the famous ghost stations. They basically were stations that had originally been part of the train lines that ran throughout the entire city. So here, trains from the west would literally pass under East Berlin. But the reason they were called ghost stations is because the stations were non-operational. The only people that were allowed down here onto the platforms were Soviet troops or GDR soldiers. Passengers would often talk about passing through and seeing soldiers just standing on the platform motionless.
In the dark.
In the dark. It's mad, isn't it, how the entire city was disrupted by that division and the lengths to which the East German side went to make sure that... Sorry, I've just discovered I've now lost 2 buttons.
Where's the other one from?
They're shedding.
Oh my goodness, what the heck? Oh.
So after a few escape attempts by guards at various stations, the East Berlin military decided that they couldn't risk any more, so that when guards were on duty on the platform, they locked them in.
While all that played out underground, above ground, people were finding other ways to escape. To most of us, David Hassellhoff is something of a hairy-chested, ironic figure, best known for starring in glossy escapist 80s and 90s TV shows, exports that became hugely popular across Europe.
Ein Auto, ein Computer, ein Mann.
But in Germany, Hassellhoff developed a second, musical career. The German pop scene of the 1980s was far more open to crossover performers. TV celebrities, actors and entertainers could often find success recording upbeat, synthesizer-driven pop songs. And Hassellhoff already had a huge advantage. Knight Rider had become a massive hit across West Germany and much of Europe. For millions of viewers, he was already a familiar face, the charismatic, big-haired American hero with a digital watch and a futuristic talking car.
In the mid-1980s, he began releasing pop records aimed squarely at the European market. Songs that fitted neatly into the era's brand of stadium-sized Europop. And they found an audience, especially in West Germany. Hassellhoff toured, performed on TV shows, and built a loyal fan base. By the end of the decade, he had become a genuine pop star there. And then, just as the Cold War itself was beginning to wobble, one particular song would push that strange crossover career into something much bigger. In 1989, Looking for Freedom went straight to #1 and became an unexpected anthem of a divided Germany.
It may sound improbable that the Hoff became a rock star until you remember that West Berlin in the 1980s was an island inside of East Germany.
You've probably heard of Checkpoint Charlie, but there were actually two other checkpoints, Alpha and Bravo, before you could get to East Berlin. Charlie was the final one of 3. There were a couple of other ways to get into Berlin. There were train lines you could fly in, of course, but if you were coming by road, first you had to go from the west through Checkpoint Alpha, and there are a whole load of rules. If you were travelling along this road, you had to watch an information video before you could even start out on your journey.
You will travel along a 103-mile route through East Germany. We acknowledge East German traffic regulations, although only accept Soviet authority.
Do you want to explain why your eyes are so red?
I had salt spray in my hair. When I got my hair cut the last time, they upsold me some salt spray. And because I don't like my hair right now, I thought I'd put some salt spray in and see if I could style it so I liked it a bit. But consequently, I've now come out in the rain and my eyes are red because I've had a load of salt run into my eyes.
The East Germans wanted to keep Western influence out, and the West wasn't exactly keen on communist ideas spreading in. But when the wall went up, it left something rather awkward on the wrong side.
This is one of 3 Soviet war memorials in Berlin. This one was the first, and it was unveiled in 1945, November of that year. In 1961, when the wall went up, this was on the wrong side of the wall. It was on the western side. And West Berliners weren't happy. This Soviet war memorial, in order not to provoke World War III, ended up being guarded by British soldiers throughout the Cold War. In 2014, when Russia invaded Crimea, the monument was vandalised and there was widespread calls to have it removed. But the powers that be have pledged that they're going to continue to honour those 1990 agreements. What's really interesting going around Berlin is how indebted the city feels to America in particular. Not so much Britain, but America.
I understand, especially people just after the Second World War feeling extremely grateful towards the Americans.
And the British.
And the
the
British.
French.
But mainly the Americans printed money, made a whole new currency, and got their economy going overnight.
Yeah.
In an era before internet or smartphones, controlling the flow of ideas and culture meant controlling the movement of people. But it had to be done carefully, without tipping the Cold War into something far worse. Even at the height of the Cold War, it was still possible to cross between West Berlin and East Berlin, but who you were made a very big difference. For civilians, crossing the border could be a slow and intimidating experience. West Berliners and foreign visitors were usually allowed to enter East Berlin for short visits, but they had to pass through strict checkpoints and exchange a mandatory amount of Western currency for East German marks. The process could take time, and the presence of armed guards, mirrors checking under cars, and heavily controlled border crossings made it clear that this was no ordinary frontier. For East Germans, the situation was far more restrictive. Travel to the west was tightly controlled and permission was rarely granted, especially for younger people. Many East Berliners would live their entire lives without ever being allowed to cross the wall. However, military and diplomatic personnel from the US, Britain and France, and the USSR had special rights dating back to the end of the Second World War. Because Berlin was still technically an occupied city, Allied soldiers and officials could travel between sectors without visas, though they were still watched carefully by East German border guards. And these crossings often took place at the most famous checkpoint of all.
Behind me is Checkpoint Charlie. This isn't the original. The original building was moved to the Allied Museum over in the British sector, I think. They used to call this the most dangerous place on earth. Shortly after the wall went up, in October of that year, a US diplomat who had got used to sort of crossing over and enjoying the sort of cheap delights that were on offer in East Berlin tried to cross Checkpoint Charlie, and the Soviets over on that side, this was the American side here, said we need to see your passport, and he said, well, we don't recognise your country or your city, so you've never asked for it before, you're not having it now. And they said, no, off you go, you're not coming in. So the following night he came back with a military escort and said, now you're going to let me in, and I'm not showing you my passport. And the Soviet response was to wheel out the tanks, and in response to that the Americans brought their tanks in, and for the next 19 hours the world stood on the brink of World War III. The situation was ridiculous, de-escalated really gradually, with the tanks being negotiated back like a few feet at a time. Well, we'll move ours back a little bit. Okay, but you need to move two of yours back a bit. And this went on until eventually the whole thing de-escalated. But all it would have taken was just one trigger-happy soldier on either side to let off a shot. And, well, if you ever wanted a practical demonstration of who won the Cold War, you've got a McDonald's there, you've got a KFC there, you've got museum there, you've got gift shop there. And I suppose how much you like capitalism will depend on whether you think this is a good thing or not. The Checkpoint Charlie, the former most dangerous place on earth, has now become a tourist trap. We've just been in the shop, the Checkpoint Charlie Museum, the Wall Museum shop. And it's like, you ever gone to one of those fossil shops where there's someone in the back cleaning up the fossils? You sort of see them. Did you see the guy in there?
No,
Basically,
he was cleaning fossils.
Cleaning up, no, not fossils, bits of wall.
No.
There was a window so you could see him working at a workshop.
I didn't see that.
Cleaning up bits of Berlin Wall and sticking them onto plinths and things and decorating them. And the whole thing is, you can buy NATO mugs in there. There's all American music playing. It's sort of a real celebration of America, isn't it? And the West in that shop.
Yeah, they've got like Bruce Springsteen playing inside this shop and stuff.
I don't know. It felt a bit distasteful. I've always wanted to come here. Since I was a teenager, and I always had a very, very different idea of what Checkpoint Charlie would be like.
It's capitalism in action.
Yeah. If the Soviets had won the Cold War, you wouldn't have a souvenir shop.
No, you'd have statues.
Yeah, you'd have lots of statues. I mean, it didn't stop me buying a new badge for my lapel, but it was cool.
And some postcards for our patrons.
And some postcards for our patrons that I'm not going to take out because it's still peeing down. If you would like a chance to win a Checkpoint Charlie postcard, which we will sign, join our Patreon or become a channel member, www.patreon.com/Mr. Biffo, and you can win an authentic Checkpoint Charlie postcard and make yourself part of the problem.
Life in East Germany offered less choice, fewer luxuries, and little of the consumer culture and perceived freedom that defined the West. And for many people, that contrast made what lay on the other side of the wall all the more appealing.
Life on the eastern side of the wall meant living inside a very different political and economic system. Despite the name, it was neither particularly democratic nor truly a republic in the Western sense. Power rested firmly in the hands of a single ruling party, the Socialist Unity Party of Germany, which controlled the government, the media, and much of everyday life. Elections were held, but voters were presented with a single approved list of candidates. Opposition parties existed only in name. East Germany functioned as a one-party socialist state, closely aligned with the Soviet Union. The country's economy was centrally planned, meaning the state controlled what was produced, how much was produced, and what people could buy.
I don't know if you can see that massive Coca-Cola neon advert that's on top of the building at the end of this street, but we're deep in East Berlin now, or what was East Berlin. And of course, because it was a Western product, Coca-Cola wasn't allowed in East Berlin or East Germany. But people wanted it, so the DDR said, oh, we need to come up with something better. So they invented this thing called Vita Cola, which was, actually, it was thicker than Coca-Cola, bizarrely, because it had slightly different ingredients. So when the wall fell and Germany was reunified, Vita Cola's business collapsed because Coca-Cola was suddenly freely available in East Germany. However, over time, they developed this thing that they call nostalgia, and there was such a warm feeling for people who used to remember and grew up with Vita Cola. They've since brought it back and you can still get it.
East Germany built its own parallel consumer world. The most famous example was the Trabant, a tiny two-stroke car that became a symbol of everyday life in the East. TV and radio were tightly controlled, broadcasting programmes designed to promote socialist values in the achievements of the East German system. One of the most famous was the Schwarze Kanal, or the Black Channel, which is German slang for a sewer. It would show clips from Western television and then explain to viewers why what they had just seen was supposedly capitalist propaganda. Music was released through the official record label Amiga, which produced everything from classical recordings to state-approved pop and rock, with lyrics monitored closely to ensure artists were singing from a state-approved hymn sheet. Even international travel had its socialist equivalent. The national airline, Interflug, connected East Berlin to destinations across the Eastern Bloc and occasionally beyond. And when Western consumer culture proved too tempting to ignore, East Germany simply created its own versions. There were local soft drinks designed to compete with Western cola, domestic denim brands intended to rival American jeans, and even East Germany's own answer to the video game boom of the 1980s, the Polyplay, a state-built arcade machine found in youth clubs and holiday camps.
But just across the wall, the shop windows of West Berlin were filled with the very products that the East Germans were told they didn't need. Over time, the political climate began to shift. Beginning in the 1970s, West Germans were allowed to visit relatives in the East, and limited day visas made it possible, under certain conditions, for East Berliners to cross the border. Cultural influences that had long seeped across the wall through television and radio were now experienced directly, something the East German authorities could never completely control.
We headed to the border crossing hall at Friedrichstrasse station, where visitors from the West entered East Berlin. And it wasn't just people passing through. Western records were sometimes smuggled across, carried in bags hidden among belongings, then copied, shared and passed from hand to hand. And it got the nickname the Palace of Tears due to the fact that people would bid tearful farewells to their loved ones.
Nowadays it's a free museum. We're going to go in and have a quick look. What's mad is that the two crossings, depending which direction you went in, the crossing coming from west to east was brightly lit, whereas the crossing going from east to west was dark. So it felt like you were going to a dark place, because obviously it was controlled by the DDR. It's closed, Sanya.
When does it open?
I don't know.
Don't cry, little one. Don't cry.
I really wanted to see the Palace of Tears, but it's closed. by the magic of my magical tears and my magic colour changing shirt, we have jumped in time forwards. The weather's better and it's open. Let's go in. This was designed to look welcoming and warm, but it's really depressing in that sort of 60s Soviet classicism style. What we have here are pieces of the original Berlin Wall from 1961 when they first blocked it off in that,
No way.
what do they call it, barbed wire Sunday. So that behind me is literally the border checkpoint. Right, so this is what Sanya's crossing the border, east to west.
Yeah.
Just stamped your papers, probably asked you where you were going, what you're carrying. It's insane that this is a border in a city that was previously united. Mm-hmm. A border between two different ideologies, countries, in a city that didn't previously exist, just one night. There you go. This place was apparently full of cameras, so they could monitor everyone in and out. It was just total surveillance.
The slow spread of Western culture didn't go unnoticed. The more it took hold across West Berlin, the more closely the state began to watch. Controlling a country the size of East Germany required more than just walls and border guards. For that, the state relied on one of the most extensive intelligence services ever created, the Stasi. Officially known as the Ministry for State Security, the Stasi were East Germany's secret police. Its job was to protect the state by identifying and neutralising any potential threat. In practice, that meant keeping a very close eye on the population. By the 1980s, the Stasi had tens of thousands of full-time employees and hundreds of thousands of informants. Teachers, neighbours, work colleagues, cats, dogs, even family members. Many East Germans never knew who among the people around them might be quietly reporting back to the authorities. The Stasi compiled vast files on millions of citizens, even collecting an enormous library of smells. They stored thousands of scent samples in airtight jars, allowing them to track citizens using dogs. They were also deeply concerned about culture. Western music, films and television were seen as dangerous influences, capable of undermining socialist values and encouraging young East Germans to look longingly across the wall. So the Stasi watched closely for signs that Western pop culture was gaining too much influence.
It's peeing down again, as you can see. The pink building behind me with the Ukrainian flag is the Ukrainian embassy, but after World War II it was initially inhabited as a prison by the KGB, not as prisoners, but they put political prisoners in there, and then later it was the torture centre of the Stasi before they moved into a much bigger facility elsewhere in the city. Sanya, you asked me, didn't you? Jesus, this weather. Thanks, Berlin. You asked me why people went along with the whole Soviet thing and the secret police thing. And it's partly because pre-Nazi era, there were communists in Germany, and many of those became sort of the first government of East Germany and East Berlin. But something else that I was curious about was how... Sanya's put her brolly over me, so you're going to get me... Oh my God, the brolly is just chaos. Something else that I was curious about was just how it worked with how much of East Germany and East Berlin was directly controlled by the Soviets. And once the country had been officially declared a state in its own right by the Soviets, they kind of took a step back and kind of went, no, we aren't involved anymore. It's now in the hands of the East Germans, and you will see what a successful communist country it will become. But they were always there, breathing over their shoulders, really pulling the strings of everything that happened. But there were plenty of East Germans who were more than happy to do the Stasi's bidding. At one point it was estimated that a third of East Berliners were involved with the Stasi or were
My umbrella keeps turning inside out.
Okay, I'll do this really quickly.
God, I'm gonna stand on this side.
It was believed that at one point a third of East Berliners worked for the Stasi or were informants for the Stasi.
One subculture in particular made the authorities nervous: punk. To East German officials, the punk movement represented everything they feared: anti-authoritarian attitudes, chaotic music, and a rejection of state control. The Stasi infiltrated punk groups, recruited informants within the scene, and monitored concerts and gatherings. In some cases, musicians were banned from performing altogether. The more the authorities tried to suppress Western music and rebellious subcultures, the more attractive they became. Young East Germans began trading bootleg cassette tapes of Western music, and in a country where leaving was forbidden, music proved much harder to contain.
Nicken, Licken, der Haus ist on fire.
Achtung, ist Rockmeister mit der Forbidden Music Volume 1, der Ultimate Capitalist Collection auf der Dark Dark Sounds. From der Other Side auf der Berlin-Mauer ist der Western Heavy Metal, Hard Rock und der obszene Punk Rock auf der Mohawks. Das ist der Rebel Music auf der Longhairs. Featuring Nick Kershaw, Scritti Politti, Hall & Oates, Frankie geht zu Hollywood, Thomas Dolby und Zilla Black. Den Neffen und Nichten ist das Zuhören verboten. Get it before it is banned.
Ich bin ein Longhair.
Warnung, der Besitz dieses Albums ist illegal in der GDR.
Du bist ein Longhair.
The Mega Cat says,
So, give you an idea of how full on the Stasi were. Just on the site here, building's not there anymore, used to be the main post office for East Berlin. And the Stasi had an office within it called Department M, whose job was to read the post before it was delivered. They had a list that was updated daily of things they should look out for, such as incomplete addresses, believe it or not, overly ornate envelopes, anything from organisations from the West being sent into East Berlin. They'd open it, read it, decide whether there was anything to be worried about, send it back up, then it would be delivered. It's insane.
Why overly ornate envelopes? Why were they more suspicious than anything else? Like, if you're going to go to such effort to have attention drawn to your envelope, surely you've got nothing to hide in there.
You'd think not, but maybe they just didn't
Yoo-hoo,
like...
yoo-hoo, I'm going to tell some secrets.
Maybe they didn't like show-offs.
maybe that's it. Yeah, show-offs are banned.
But by the end of the whole East-West thing and the wall falling, the Soviets were actually less hardcore than the East Berlin government. It was actually the East Berliners by the end fell out with the Soviets.
Really?
Because the Soviets, under Gorbachev, were all like, well, it's glasnost, perestroika, we need to kind of loosen things up a bit. Whereas, particularly the Stasi remained aligned with the KGB, of course, hardcore. But the East Berlin government and the Soviet government, they were not on great terms. But the East Berliners were more, or at least the government were, more kind of militantly communist. Second take of this bit because Sanya criticised my pronunciation of Janowitz-Brücke, which was another ghost station in the GDR, which obviously had the West German trains pass through. But this one was particularly unique because it was very dry atmosphere down in the station on the platforms. So the GDR used it to store oranges, and reportedly passengers all along the U-Bahn line could smell oranges during the years that they stored fruit down here. I told you you'd like that. But Tanya's face is like, what? I know what facts you're interested in. Say what you wanted to say.
Aren't you glad that Paul told you that fact?
Okay, that sounded like, aren't you glad?
Aren't you glad?
Just say, aren't you glad?
Aren't you glad that Paul told you that fact?
That didn't work.
Aren't you glad?
So all around the city, you'll see these pipes that are above ground, and most of them are blue because they carry water, but the pink ones carry ham around the city.
While Western culture worked as a subtle form of influence, gradually undermining communist ideology, the GDR relied on far more direct propaganda. Messaging that over time proved far less persuasive to its own population. Propaganda in East Berlin wasn't limited to newspapers, television or political speeches. It was built directly into the city itself. After the war, much of Berlin lay in ruins, and for the leadership of the GDR, this destruction presented an opportunity. They believed the capital of East Germany had to look like a communist success story. Entire districts were redesigned to demonstrate strength, modernity and optimism. The goal was to create a capital city that could rival the prosperity and glamour of the West. Every tower block, every parade avenue, every monumental structure was meant to send the same message. And nowhere was that message more visible than in one of East Berlin's most iconic streets.
So we're just coming up on Karl Marx Alley. It was formerly known as Stalin Alley, and it was the centrepiece of East Berlin. The building right there is the Kino International. Have I said that all right? Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, Kino International. She keeps correcting my pronunciation.
I don't. I did it once for one letter.
Anyway, that was as you might have ascertained, was a cinema, but it was a real centrepiece of the whole East Berlin propaganda project. It was like, whoa, hey, they might have films in the West, but we've got them here too. But it also really interestingly had, it sort of tracked how worried the East Berliners and the Soviets got over the West and what the West was offering, because the final film premiere that showed there in 1989 was a gay film called Coming Out, and it was premiered on the day the Berlin Wall fell.
Wow.
Yeah, so the sort of thing that was otherwise unthinkable, where they were like, my God, we've got to give them more of what they're getting in the West.
Yeah.
So the building here is called, I think, Cafe Moscow, which is, again, another original building, and as you can see, it's got a model of Sputnik on the top of it. Cafe Moscow, which is now a conference centre, when it was built, it was intended to be a symbol of the links between the DDR and the Soviet Union. The Sputnik on top was a gift from the Soviet ambassador. East Germans could come here and enjoy Russian food. So potatoes, beetroots, borscht. Like everything in the DDR, Stalin Alley was a form of soft propaganda to kind of go, well, look how socialism is working. It was built in a style called Soviet classicism, which basically prioritised big open space and massive buildings designed to sort of project power. But all these buildings along here were workers' homes, because it was sort of to go, look how we're looking after our people. We're doing it better than those in the West. Look at our massive streets. But it was also here in 1953 that the first signs of dissent within East Berlin and East Germany were sown. The DDR government suddenly upped workers' quotas for the workers that were building Stalin Alley. And the workers staged a massive protest here on this street, which spread throughout East Germany. And the Soviets brought in tanks and shut the whole thing down very violently. And it had two kind of outcomes. On one hand, people kind of went, hang on, maybe the Soviets and the East German government aren't the good guys. But on the other hand, people went, oh bugger, if we step out of line, they're going to bring in tanks and soldiers with guns. So people were kind of silenced by violence. That wasn't meant to rhyme, but it did. I'm a poet and I don't know it. I'm a rapper and the only word I can think of is crapper. I'm a rapper and I'm sat on the crapper, which I'm not.
Somewhere around here, there used to be a massive statue of Stalin, which after he died, the Soviets decided that they were going to take it down because the cult of personality was not very socialist, and they thought people should basically worship the state instead, or something like that. So yeah, they got rid of it. And they also renamed this street from Stalin Alley to Karl Marx Alley. Sick burn, Stalin.
By the way,
That's what you get for killing loads of people
Yes.
and having a cult of personality.
yes, Stalin. What is it with people with cult personalities? They seem. It seems like they're like history's worst people.
It does seem that way, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
it's a whole, you know.
What did they do? Soviets built statues. They thought that was a great way to win people's favour over.
Yeah.
It's like,
You're
guys,
hungry?
You
Don't
want
worry.
technology? It's like, no, we'll give you statues.
Don't worry that there's no
Meanwhile-
food in the shops.
Yeah.
We've got statues.
We've got statues, guys.
Nick
like,
them.
How cool is that? Meanwhile, you've got the Americans dropping sweets from the sky and giving people food. So it was kind of like,
Although ironically, we'll get to it, it was only when the East started kind of liberalising a bit, once Gorbachev came in and Glasnost and all the rest of it, and everything started getting a little bit freer and a bit looser, that was when people were like, oh, okay, maybe they're not going to roll tanks over our heads.
Это из-за него у нас политическая нестабильность.
Да благодаря ему у нас свобода.
За Горбачева!
За Горбачева!
За Горбачева!
Sometimes nothing brings people together like a nice hot pizza from Pizza Hut.
The fear did keep people in check to a degree. That's the truth. You know, it fell when they stopped being as scared. When friendly Gorbachev with his blob. Sorry, I'll say it again. So this video is part of a series we're doing on this channel looking at the Cold War and trying to find what remains of it, how it shaped the world we live in today. If you're interested, we've got a playlist. In one of our previous videos, we went to Stevenage and we asked the question, why does Stevenage look Soviet? We got a whole load of comments from people going, it doesn't look Soviet. Actually, it was influenced by a Dutch village. Look at that. They got that in Stevenage. Look around here, this whole place looks like just Stevenage on steroids. Do not tell me Stevenage doesn't look Soviet. I never said Stevenage was Soviet, it looks Soviet. Look at it. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. There is a square clock. There are square clocks all over East Berlin. Stevenage has a square clock. Do not tell me Stevenage looks Dutch. Berlin looks like East Stevenage. Look, on that building, there is a relief with a cosmonaut on it. There is an underpass in Stevenage with a relief that has cosmonauts on it. Do not tell me I'm wrong. Communist relief. We all have a bit of communist relief, hey lads?
in our last video, a guy complained about your crude humour. And he said his kids were in the room and he didn't want them hearing stuff like that.
This world clock, designed by the artist Walter Womacker of the band Womack and Womack, displays time from 148 countries around the world. The idea was that it symbolised an internationalist future that socialism and communism wanted to be part of. Of course, the irony was that people in East Berlin couldn't visit most of these countries because they were barred from leaving. This is weird.
This is the TV tower, which is the fourth biggest building in Europe. And it was designed by East Germany as a symbol of their technological superiority.
So it was a literal kind of middle finger to West Germany and NATO. The irony was with it is that while religious practices were being clamped down upon in East Berlin, when the sun hits it at a certain time of day, a crucifix appears upon its surface and they've come to call that the Pope's Revenge. Do you know what the Berlin TV tower reminds me of?
What?
Chupa Chups. Because it looks like a big Chupa Chup. They should get Chupa Chups to sponsor it and kind of
wrap it in cellophane and give it a flavour.
Yeah, I would. I'd like to give that a big lick.
That guy's going to come back and complain.
What guy?
The guy that with his kids that weren't happy.
Okay, let him go.
I'll never let him go.
Okay, I said I want to lick the Berlin TV tower. If he reads stuff into that and complains that it's too lewd for his kids, this video, that says more about him than us. Let's face it, anytime you get a tower like that, it is basically a projection, isn't it? It's
what are you trying to compensate for?
Yeah,
that sort of
exactly.
thing, right? What were the Soviets trying to compensate for?
Stalin's little penis.
Just as the GDR tried to present East Berlin as a model socialist capital, the Western powers were equally determined to turn West Berlin into a showcase for capitalism. The West invested heavily in making the city thrive. Residents of West Berlin enjoyed a range of benefits designed to keep the city vibrant and attractive. Young men living there were exempt from military service, which helped attract students, artists, and young professionals. Businesses were offered generous tax incentives to set up operations in the city. Visitors arriving from East Germany were given a small payment known as welcome money, a symbolic gesture meant to give them a glimpse of the West's consumer economy. The result was a city that felt energetic, creative, and free. West Berlin developed a reputation as a cultural hotspot, full of music, art, nightlife, and political debate. Rather than constructing grand symbols of ideology like the East Germans, the West tried to make everyday life itself the advertisement. And there was one other powerful tool in this ideological competition: radio.
Right from the start of Berlin's post-war occupation, music was part of the story, and it began here. This was the headquarters of RIAS, Radio in American Sector. It was set up in 1946 as an information service for West Berliners, and to counter some of the information that was being broadcast over in East Berlin. Very early on, they were playing music from jazz to opera to classical, but it was also here that they broadcast news, which all had to be vetted by the Americans. The name Radio in American Sector hid the fact that it was also entirely funded by America. The Soviets were unsettled by this. In fact, in 1953, they directly blamed RIAS for provoking the workers' uprising. As time went on, RIAS became a vital propaganda tool. I love the fact that this is called the Funk House in German. But the propaganda war between the GDR and RIAS in particular was full on. RIAS's response to it all was just to kind of go, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know. We're just doing like music and just reporting the news. Unlike East German radio, nothing they did here at RIAS was overtly political. It always had to be plausible deniability when it came to the messaging. Even in the children's programming, which both the West and the GDR saw children as a vital audience for promoting ideology, getting to their heads young. And they had a show that ran here called Uncle Tobias that very subtly promoted messages of democracy and capitalism and freedom. The GDR hated RIAS because RIAS broadcast across Berlin, and they actually made it illegal in East Berlin to listen to RIAS, but it didn't stop people doing that. People did it because they liked the mix of music and entertainment. The East Berliners changed the acronym from a Radio in American Sector to Rundfunk im Amisold, sorry about the pronunciation, but broadcast on the American Army's payroll, which technically was true. But they tried to discourage people from listening to it by saying that all it broadcast was lies and agitation, and instructions to murder and sabotage, and criticised American boogie-woogie culture, putting culture in ironic quotation marks.
Born in the USA, unser Special heute. Bruce Springsteen. Herzlichen Glückwunsch, The Boss.
Have you brought any salami with you?
Rias was such a success that it inspired America to set up Radio Free Europe, which broadcast similar soft propaganda from Prague all across the Iron Curtain.
But it's mad to think that it was from here that East Berliners got their first taste of rock and pop music that became such a vital part of winning the Cold War. And in fact, as a practical demonstration, when you think about when the Americans got involved in Vietnam to bring down the communist regime there, it didn't work because they didn't use propaganda in the same way. They used military force. Is that power of propaganda and the power of waiting and having patience and not just rolling in with tanks and guns, that culture can be used as effectively as any other weapon. So why was the Hoff in particular so popular in Germany? Well, there are a few reasons. He became a symbol of Western freedom. You know, this was a guy who was a cool American with a leather jacket and a expensive looking car, whereas in East Berlin, all they had were plastic Trabants that they had to wait 15 years to be allowed to own. And on top of that, he played a kind of music called Schlager, which is very simple, sentimental rock. And his big hit in Germany, Looking for Freedom, was based upon an earlier hit from the 60s. So it had a familiar tune. On top of that, it was released at a time when East Berlin had been walled in for decades. It contained the word freedom. It was upbeat, it was uplifting. It was sung by a superstar in their eyes. On top of that, it was a superstar with a German surname. So when that song became a hit in Germany, it was seen as a local boy done good. And it just summed up the feeling of the time. So whereas we in the West, not West Berlin, but we outside of Germany may see it as a bit cheesy, that song, it had completely different connotations in this Cold War city that was at the front line of the war between the East and West ideologies.
It might seem ludicrous that music could be seen as dangerous, but both sides viewed the other's ideas and culture as an existential threat, and that fear pushed them toward increasingly extreme methods to counter it. With two rival systems facing each other across a single city, Berlin became a magnet for espionage. Agents from the US, Britain, France and the Soviet Union all operated here, alongside the intelligence services of West Germany and East Germany. Diplomats, journalists, soldiers and businessmen could all potentially be spies. The intelligence services of the West and the East constantly tried to infiltrate each other's governments, recruit informants and intercept communications. Signals, radio transmissions and military communications were constantly being monitored by both sides.
2 years following the erection of the Berlin Wall, the Americans decided they wanted a big erection of their own. This hill that we're on isn't natural. Following World War II, when they started clearing the city of the rubble and the destroyed buildings, they needed somewhere to put it. And they put it here. This entire hill is the destroyed ruins of Berlin. It's really hard to believe, but it's true. And they chose this site because there was a a partially built technical college, which was going to be part of Hitler's post-war plans had he won the Second World War, that was built here. And they just chucked all the rubble and debris on top of it. And so by 1963, the Cold War was in full effect. And the Americans wanted a way to be able to listen into East Berlin. And this is the site that they chose. And this was the Teufelsberg listening station. The mountain is, I think, 120 metres above sea level, which allows clear line of sight not only over Berlin, but deep into East German territory. And that's what the phallic domes up there were for. They were radar and listening equipment. That basically this was a spy centre. And now look, bonkers. Tribute up there to my favourite Beatle, John McCartan.
That's how I feel about that joke.
Pardon?
Yeah, this finally.
Wish I had a pen, because then I could write "fuck cats." Someone's laughing. A hell of a shaft. It's mad, isn't it? And you think that the different sort of layers of history. You've got Nazi era Germany under our feet, then you get Cold War infrastructure, and then on top of that you get modern graffiti. Post Cold War.
When the Cold War ended, Teufelsberg was decommissioned and sold off, with plans for a hotel. But the project fell through and the site was reclaimed by Berlin's counterculture, becoming Europe's largest street art gallery. A release of the city's pent-up creativity, like it was literally painting over the Cold War.
Now if they had this in the UK, what it would be. Help on every surface. When this place was up and running, they found that their signals went further into East Berlin at certain times of the year, and it took them a while to work out why. They wondered whether it was weather or atmospheric conditions. And they worked out that it coincided with a joint West German American festival that they had every year, and the signal was being boosted by the Ferris wheel. So after they discovered this, they decided to keep the Ferris wheel up all year round to boost the signal. It's like everything became part of the machine. I'm done. That's a good story, isn't it?
Yeah. What? Are you being filthy again?
That's not filthy, that is beautiful. A mother breastfeeding her, well, she's wasting the milk, but that's not filthy.
Is that a breast?
What did you think it was? So even though this place was run by the American NSA, it was actually technically in British territory, in the British sector of West Berlin. But the GCHQ, Britain's GCHQ, which is basically our version of the NSA, also operated out of here. So there was still that kind of close cooperation. I can't stop thinking about what it looks like. absolutely incredible. What? Hello? Wow, that's cool. I wonder if they've... It's good echo. There you go.
Do you have to do the tongue thing every time?
Said no one ever. What's really mad about this place is there's all this graffiti, but not a single knob drawn anywhere. I know they don't like it called graffiti. They call it street art, don't they? And at my school, street art just was like a knob and balls. And if you were a real artist, you did like some dots coming out the top. But I suppose because here the canvas is a big cock and balls, what's the point? I've been walking non-stop for 4 days. My voice is giving out. If I see a deck chair, I'm going to sit in it. They must have known what they were doing when they designed it. You cannot tell me it was accidental. Surely they did it as a sign to the East Germans. This had to, the design of it had to be some sort of form of, I was going to say soft propaganda, but there's nothing soft about it. I think if there's one thing we can take away from this is that Berlin loves vandals. If you're a vandal, come here. They'll give you a former spy base to do your vandalism on.
Such a granddad.
It's my brand.
The Cold War was a battle of narratives. In the East, the West was portrayed as corrupt and dangerous. In the West, communism was framed as a system that suppressed political freedom, controlled its citizens, and limited individual choice.
I wonder how different our views would be had we been born or grown up in Russia.
Well, that's it, isn't it? I mean, the Cold War was, as much as anything else, a propaganda war. It showed the nations of the world a different way to fight wars, which was with information, controlling the narrative, with propaganda, shaping the minds of their populations or the minds of enemy populations or opposing nations.
Yeah,
and I think
sure.
that's where we're at, and it started here.
Modern warfare is almost as much about shaping public opinion as it is, or shaping individual opinions as it is drones, guns.
Yeah, it is. And if you
missiles,
think that's misguided or cynical, maybe ask yourself why you think that.
Once upon a time, there was a king who ruled a very large kingdom. The king had many advisors. Some helped him build roads, some helped him fight wars, some helped him just wash his bits. But the most important advisor of all was a very clever wizard called Propagando. Propagando had a special talent. He understood that if you could control the stories people heard, you could control what they believed. The king was very disappointed when Propagando told him about this. He said,
"Propaganda, you stupid old mage. I hired you to do magic spells and turn my farts into gold, not tell stories."
But Propagando replied,
"Oh, but telling these sorts of stories is more powerful than any spell."
The king loved nothing more than feeling powerful. So from then on, whenever the king wanted to control people, Propagando would climb to the tallest tower in the castle and shout stories to the citizens about how great their kingdom was. If the king wanted them to feel afraid, Propagando would tell stories about dangerous dragons beyond the border. If the king wanted them to trust him, Propagando would tell stories about how wise and brave and strong their ruler was. Over time, other kings began to notice how useful Propagando's ideas were. So they too hired story wizards to tell stories about heroes, about villains, and about why their kingdom was right and the other kingdom was stupid and smelly. And what people believed depended entirely upon which kingdom they lived in. Because once a story is told often enough, people can begin to believe it is simply the way the world is.
The end? By the mid to late 1980s, the gap between East and West was becoming impossible to ignore. Decades of Western influence had collided with the realities of life in the GDR, and its people were no longer content with what they were given. The pressure on the system was mounting.
So this was West Berlin, and it was on this spot in front of the Brandenburg Gate that Ronald Reagan gave his famous speech in which he implored Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, or Mr. Gorbachev, open your mouth, peel open your mouth. That's German for wall.
Between 1961, when the wall went up, all the way until 1989, it was just no man's land. The Brandenburg Gate was stuck in the middle of it.
Which is just bizarre when you look at it. It's sort of magnificent in its kind of German massiveness, I suppose. It's very German, isn't it? The Brandenburg Gate.
Yeah, it is.
It's just bizarre. It's just bizarre. What a thing. This was just locked away behind wall. You know, literally the Berlin Wall ran around this, and this was in the middle. Just there, in 1987, literally within the shadow of Death Strip, Brandenburg Gate and Berlin Wall, they held a rock concert with such stars as Genesis, David Bowie and Annie Lennox on the western side, and some of the speakers were aimed over the wall so that people in the east could hear it. It was pure propaganda. You cannot say that rock music didn't play a part in the fall of the Berlin Wall when they were doing that on purpose. They knew what they were doing.
The following year, 2 enormous Western pop concerts were scheduled to take place in front of the Reichstag, close enough so that the sound would carry across into East Berlin. One featured Pink Floyd and another the biggest pop star on the planet at the time, Michael Jackson. To the authorities in the GDR, they feared a repeat of what had happened the previous year and hatched a plan to counter anything Michael Jackson might do to their children. The government organised a state-sponsored rock festival in East Berlin, part of the Friedenswoche der Berliner Jugend, or Peace Week of the Berlin Youth, to coincide with the concert in the West. The idea was simple: give young East Germans their own show so they wouldn't be tempted to gather at the wall.
Among the performers were several international acts approved by the East German authorities, including James Brown and Marillion. Unsurprisingly, thousands of young East Berliners nevertheless gathered near the Brandenburg Gate, hoping to hear Michael Jackson's terrifying shrieks drifting over the wall. Stasi officers quietly infiltrated the crowds, monitoring conversations and watching carefully for signs of unrest. Official Stasi documents revealed later showed that they feared Jackson instigating a moonwalk revolution. Just a month later, in July 1988, another Western rock star performed in East Berlin. Bruce Springsteen played to a crowd of more than 300,000 people, and at one point during the show, he addressed the audience directly. He told them he was not there for or against any government. He had come, he said, to play rock and roll in the hope that one day all barriers would be torn down. And then he launched into one of his biggest songs, Born in the USA.
Music was key to it. It was part of the propaganda war. By 88 and 89, everything had come to a head for East Germany. The country was virtually bankrupt, having been hemmed in economically by the West. It was an ecological disaster, pollution in the air and rivers. People were protesting the decades of austerity and shortages. And on top of that, Hungary and Czechoslovakia, 2 countries in the Soviet Union, decided to open their borders. And people realised, oh, hang on, we can get to the West that way. So they'd take holidays to Hungary and Czechoslovakia and not come home. So not only were people leaving in record numbers, or numbers not seen since before this thing went up, but they were protesting. They were seeing thanks to Western TV and radio broadcasts, what was happening in Poland with the Solidarity movement. They'd seen the protests in China with Tiananmen Square, and people were saying, well, if they can have uprisings, maybe we can as well. The GDR's leadership under Erich Honecker decided we need to do something about this, and they put into motion a plan that had slightly frightening connotations given Germany's history. In 1979, the East German government had drawn up something called Plan X, and by 89 they decided now was the time to enact it. And it was basically going to be the mass detention of, well, anyone that they and the Stasi deemed potentially disruptive to the East German regime. So peace activists, anyone they suspected of espionage, and they started preparing concentration camps to lock these people up. But not everyone within the government was as militant as Erich Honecker, and the same month that this plan was set to be put in motion, he was quietly retired due to ill health. And that left the way free for what happened next. So right in front of me there used to be the press offices of the GDR, and it was there on November the 9th, 1989, that the fateful press conference was held, in which it was announced accidentally that the Berlin Wall was open. Word began to spread throughout East Berlin, and people began gathering at border crossings, including one at a bridge on Bernholmer Strasse, which isn't that bridge. We were going to the bridge at Bernholmer Strasse, but as it turns out, in order to get to it, we have to cross that bridge, but that bridge has been sealed off because they're filming a movie or TV show. Anyway, at a bridge on Bernholmer Strasse, not that bridge, but one very similar to it. I mean, it is very similar to that bridge. You can probably imagine it. People started gathering in their thousands, and the poor border guards didn't really know what to do. They'd obviously been given no instructions because there hadn't been plans for the border to open that night. But over the course of the evening, more and more people showed up until they're there in their thousands. And the guards had no instructions. I mean, there was a possibility that they might have just started opening fire because people were chanting, "Let us through, let us through, bring down the wall," all of that. Then eventually the guards went, you know what, sod it, we're just going to have to open the border to relieve the pressure here. At first they started stamping passports, but the tide of humanity became too much, and they just let people through freely without checking any papers or anything. And on the western side, people greeted them with gifts and hugs, and people were going through on foot, people were going through in Trabants. And this went on all through the night. Some people went back, some people never did. But it marked the exact point that the Berlin Wall fell. Right here, not here. Not here, but at a bridge that was like this. By New Year's Eve 1989, the Berlin Wall still stood, but the borders were open. East and West Berliners were ready for a party, so they called on the one man they knew they could rely on, the Hoff. And here in front of the Brandenburg Gate, hundreds of thousands of people gathered that night. And the Hoff himself was on a crane, where he was raised up in a jacket covered in flashing lights, wearing his iconic piano scarf and belting out his hit, "Looking for Freedom." It was also raining, and because of his electrical jacket, he was terrified he was going to be electrocuted. But it became one of the most iconic and enduring images of the entire Cold War. The bloke from Knight Rider and Baywatch singing a song to a massive crowd in front of the Brandenburg Gate while the wall was behind him as well, still standing. People sat on it. And somehow that, as ridiculous and cheesy as it all was, kind of brought both halves of the city together as one people again. And also weird to think that two of the people that have performed in front of that gate are David Hassellhoff and Adolf Hitler. sort of puts history into perspective, doesn't it?
For many people watching around the world, it looked like the perfect ending to the Cold War. And in many ways it was. Within a year, East Germany ceased to exist, and the country was formally reunified as the Federal Republic of Germany. But once the euphoria faded, reality proved far more complicated. The socialist economy of the East collapsed almost overnight. State industries that had employed millions were suddenly unable to compete in a market economy. Factories closed and entire sectors disappeared. Unemployment, something that had barely existed under the old system, rose dramatically across the former East, especially for women. Many people were forced to retrain for completely new careers. Others discovered that decades of work in the socialist system didn't fully count towards pensions in the newly unified Germany. For some, reunification brought opportunity and prosperity, while for others it meant uncertainty, loss, and the feeling that their entire lives had been abruptly rewritten.
Even today, economic and political differences between Eastern and Western Germany can still be felt, visible in voting patterns, wages, and the lingering sense that the country's reunification was not quite as simple as it first appeared. And yet, something remarkable also emerged from the ruins of the Cold War. In the early 90s, the empty spaces left behind helped create one of the most influential music scenes in the world. The abandoned factories, bunkers and power stations of a newly reunited Berlin became home to an entirely new cultural movement, bringing together young people from both sides of the once divided city. Techno.
If you want the history of Berlin over the last 80 years summarised, this building does it for you. During World War II, it was an air raid shelter. Then, following the fall of Berlin, it was a KGB headquarters. Then, further into the history of the GDR, it became a fruit storage place known as the banana bunker, bananas being very rare in particular in East Berlin. And then following the fall of the Berlin Wall, it became a techno club, as did so many other abandoned buildings in the former East Berlin. And these days, it's home to a private art collection that, as it says on the door, can only be visited for appointments only. So this is Berlin in a building. I don't know about you, Sanya, but I'm ready for some clubbing.